Good Tuesday morning to you, friends. Groucho Marx. Yeah, you know him, the mustache, the cigar, the funny-looking glasses. Groucho once famously proclaimed that he wouldn't want to belong to any club that would accept him as a member. I like that. It was a joke, but there's something to it, I think. See, being part of a club means being accepted by the other members. For some clubs, any new member had to be accepted by a vote of all of the members. To assure secrecy of balloting, each member was given a white ball and a black ball, and then one by one they went to the ballot box where they deposited one of the balls to vote on the member. It was very cloak and dagger and secret. Now, a white ball was a vote in favor of the candidate, while a black ball was a vote against them. In some clubs, a single black ball was all that it took to keep one from becoming a member. You might have impressed the other 300 members, but if you got off on the wrong foot with just one of them, then you were not accepted into the club. That seems really out of touch with our society today, doesn't it? And yet we still have some places where this kind of thing happens. In others, while things are not quite so stringent, there are still requirements to become members of a group. Whether it's the Rotary or the Lions, the Masons, the Book of the Month Club, or my favorite, see if this one rings a bell to any of you, the Columbia Record and Tape Club. Remember that one? Each group sets its own rules and regulations about membership. Some are quite easy to achieve. Others, well, they take a great deal of time and energy to complete. But there's one club. There's one club that's not exclusive in any way, shape, or form. One that takes all membership criteria out of the hands of the members. And the good news is, you belong to it already. For each of us belongs to Jesus Christ. Each of us was led here by God's will, not by our own. And each of us is a member of the Christian faith, not of our choosing, but of God's. We like to think of church as ours, or even more personally, as mine. My church, my priest, my faith. It's a very personal thing for us. And even when we are willing to acknowledge some of the others who are with us, we still sometimes try to create gradations of membership. Unless you think I'm talking about other religions, has anybody ever heard the phrase cradle Episcopalian? Or one of my other favorites, near cradle Episcopalian? By identifying ourselves in this way, we may not know it and we may not intend it, but we really set ourselves apart from others. We might just be innocently trying to talk about how long we've been believers, but even that has a way of disenfranchising those who have only just come to faith. For I assure you, my friends, it makes no difference to God if you've been here for 90 years or 90 seconds. We are all part of the club. In Acts, we see Peter with a group of other Jews. He's speaking to a crowd of people, Jew and Gentile alike, and much to the surprise of the Jews, the gifts of the Holy Spirit are poured out on everyone, Jew and Gentile. Remember, Gentile just means not a Jew. So the Jews, who were certain that God was their own personal province, they're astounded that the Holy Spirit would come upon someone who was not part of their club. You see, they'd forgotten that Jesus changed the rules and leveled the playing field. He didn't die just to reconcile the Jews to God, but to reconcile all mankind. And so that means salvation comes to all, not just some. See, what they didn't realize is that we don't get to decide who is and who isn't a member. God calls us all, and we need to welcome one another as brothers and sisters, not as potential members that we get to evaluate. We really need to focus less on their qualifications, what they contribute to our efforts, what they can bring to the table, because these are decidedly not our decisions to make. God has called them just as he called us, and we need simply to welcome them, accept them, and do what we can to serve them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a 20th century German theologian, put it this way, and I quote, "Life together under the Word will remain sound and healthy only where it does not form itself into a movement, an order, a society, but rather where it understands itself as being a part of one holy Catholic Christian church, where it shares actively and passively in the sufferings and struggles and promise of the whole church." Bonhoeffer was smart. Jesus tells us as much himself in the gospel when he says, "You didn't choose me, but I choose you." That's the point. Jesus chose us. Every person who comes to the door of a church was chosen by Jesus, whether they know it or not. And that means we are not the ones who established the membership. That task was done by Jesus Christ. And he calls all of us. And it gets, wait for it, it gets even better than that. For Jesus calls us friends. Remember in the gospel, he says, "I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father." If that's not a call to membership, no, actually to brother and sisterhood, then I don't know what is. We're not just members, we are actually part of the inner circle. In the old days of empire, the highest classification a person could get was friend of the king. Yes, I used air quotes. The king's friends were accorded great status. They had 24-hour unquestioned access to the king. They were the people closest to him, were his most intimate and trusted friends and his advisors. And my brothers and sisters, Jesus tells us that we, you and me, have that status. We're not simply peasants hoping to catch a brief glimpse of the king as he passes through the city on a distant road. We don't have to worship him from afar. No, indeed, we are his closest friends, and we can be with him whenever we want to. Think about the difference that makes. As worshipers from afar, well, we don't know the king. We just have to be content to see him from a faraway distance. And since we don't have any real knowledge of the king, well, then it's easy to place ourselves on a higher plane than the people who are behind us in the crowd, also struggling for a glimpse. But as the king's friends, we have to recognize that we get to be in the inner circle, but here's the rub. So does everybody else. Everybody else is a friend of the king as well. Once again, we don't get to choose. That task was accomplished by Jesus, and he didn't choose just you or me. He chose everybody. But being chosen isn't even the end. How great is this? Peter baptized the Gentiles who received the Holy Spirit, saying that we should not withhold the water of baptism from anyone. And then he invited them to stay for several days. Now, it's easy to ignore this sentence as kind of a throwaway at the end of a story, but that would be a mistake. For this is an invitation engraved upon our hearts by the Holy Spirit, because the coming of the Spirit on us at baptism isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's an invitation for us to participate in the life of the church. It is a lifelong invitation to study and learn about the gospel and our faith, and it's an invitation to do what Jesus calls us to do, to love one another as he loved us. Theologians, scholars, they can spend their lives studying and trying to comprehend the mysteries of the Bible and the faith, and that's a valid pursuit for some. But remember that Jesus called all of us, not just some of us. While a lifetime of contemplation is fine for some, for others he makes things a bit simpler. And so he takes the entire gospel and condenses it down into 2 commandments. And you know what they are. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then, in case even that is too much for us, he condenses it just down to 1 word, and that word is simply love. Love one another as I have loved you. Love, my friends, is the message of the gospel. God loved us, all of us, each and every one of us, so much that he sent Jesus to us. Jesus loved us so much that he chose to die for us. And if we remember that love, we'll remember that we are all part of the process, that we are all friends of the King. And it doesn't really get any better than that, does it?